Hello, and welcome to ConTinual, the never-ending convention. With me today is writer, physicist, dancer, teacher, and musician, Catherine Asaro. Welcome, Catherine.
Hi, I'm delighted to be here.
We are so happy to have you. Okay, I just, did the list of part of your accomplishments, didn't even get into, the awards you've won for your writing, or the very interesting paper you did on the theory behind a workable faster than light drive, or your work as a dancer, your work as a teacher, your work as a singer and musician. There are so many lives in that sentence. Which of them came first?
Well, first of all, I should say something. I didn't make up a workable faster than light drive. I came up with mathematics that worked, but you can't actually do it, unfortunately. But it was published in the American Journal of Physics. So which came first? That's like, I would say making up stories as long as I can remember, ever since I was that big, I just love making up stories. My first memories, somewhere around 3 years old, I realized you could create entire stories in your mind. So I would do that just for fun. And they were always, girls going out into space with their cats or something. Or Supergirl, it was like girls with special abilities. I think it's innate in a lot of us to like to make up stories about heroes. And then as I got older, it got more sophisticated. What I actually did, I wasn't making up stories to write them. It was fun, but what I actually did seriously was dance. I wanted to be a professional ballet dancer. So I danced, I guess I started at about 5. I was pretty young. I have a picture, I wish I could find it. It's this picture of me standing on a stage at my first recital. I'm 5 years old and I'm wearing this little clown suit with these big fuzzy balls. It's red and blue with big fuzzy balls. And I have my bangs in my hair and I'm going like this. I'm like looking rather confused and bemused, and it's so adorable. That was my first time on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And I danced all through undergraduate. I went to college to be a dancer. And then this thing happened. I kept taking math and physics classes. And I really loved it. And I kept getting placed in classes that I wasn't ready for because I hadn't had the background. But I just loved it so much. So, finally, after a few years, they called me into the office of the dance department. She said, well, you completed the first year of a dance major, and then you've been off doing all this math and physics, and you're like 2 years behind now. Don't you think you want to be a math major or a physics major or a chemistry major? Because you have enough credits to do that. You don't have the credits to finish the dance major. And I realized she was right. I love ballet and I love jazz, but I didn't like the whole thing. I guess if you really want to be a dancer, you don't go to school to do it, unless it's a specialized school. And, it was sort of theoretical modern dance that we were learning, and it wasn't really my thing. But, oh man, I just love science and I love math. So that came second, but that I knew I'd found what I could do as a career. Mm-hmm. I actually started writing. I was working on my doctorate. I'd finished, most of the work, though I actually finished a lot of it as I was writing it because it was all theoretical. It was all math. You may have noticed the theme here. Everything I did related back to math. So, I was deriving things as I wrote it. And as much as I loved what I was doing, I needed a break. 24/7 writing equations with some words in between. I just needed a break. So I started writing some of the stories that I'd always been imagining in my head. And wow, did that take over. It took over in the same way that science, quantum physics, mathematics took over in college. Those were two things I really had a passion for. I liked dancing, I liked it a lot, but I had a passion for the physics and the writing. I guess I know now I was a writer. I was born a writer. And someone like that, you can't not write. And once I started doing it, I was a goner.
How did you balance the two things, the math and the writing?
It
Because
was
those are really intensive, both
It
of
was
them.
hard. I mean, fortunately, when you're in grad school, you have a lot of flexibility. They pay you very little. Though my advisor was good. I had Alex Delgarno, who is a theoretical astrophysicist, for my advisor. And, he was able to, I had a scholarship my first few years. And then when I became his research assistant, he paid me a pretty good, well, it was good back then. I don't think it would be considered good now, but back then it was enough to just barely live on.
Mhm.
But still, so you have the disadvantage of being poor, right? You have no money. You can't do much except pay your rent. But you have the advantage of a lot of flexibility that you never again have later in life. Essentially, you're still a student. You're still in school. So, I usually would write in the morning and then go, around noon, I'd go in and work. Or sometimes I'd go in earlier and then I'd stay later. And then I'd write when I got home. But it was pulling me. It was really pulling me because I wanted to tell these stories. I love doing it. But I stuck it out. I mean, by the time you get to graduate school at a place like Harvard, you don't get there without doing a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to just throw it away. So I finished my doctorate. I got to tell you, one of the best days in my life after getting married and having my daughter, those were two wonderful things. But probably the third best thing was not the day I finished the doctorate, because I was way behind and I wanted to graduate and I only had a few days to get it in and I wasn't going to make it. But then we had a hurricane and everything shut down. They said, well, we have to extend the deadline for turning in your thesis because, they had to shut down the university. So I just my thesis is full of typos. I didn't have time to proof it. It's terrible. But, I mean, it's not terrible. It's a very good thesis with a lot of mistakes in it. And for some of them, I wrote an errata that I put in the thesis. But I got it in. And I had stayed up for I don't know how many days. First, I had to stay up and get it bound.
I remember those days.
Yeah. So I had to do this twice and stay up and get it bound. And then I was so tired. I think I'd been up for 3 or 4 days, and I barely slept. I don't know how I did it, but somehow I did it. And I remember my friend drove me out to the bindery, which was way out. I don't remember where it was. It was very far from the university, 30, 40 miles or something. And I brought it in and I was so tired. I wasn't even thinking. And then I left and I'm walking home. I'm walking along the street and I think I'm a long way from home. I think I was like 30 or 40 miles. I thought, I can't walk. I can't call anyone. Cell phones did not exist back
Right.
then. Or I could have just called someone.
In the before times.
In the before times, yes, prehistoric times. And my friend told me he couldn't wait and he couldn't pick me up because he had, he was also a great student.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, and finally it's percolating into my brain that I got to do something. I had a quarter in my pocket and I saw a bus that said Cambridge on it. Well, I lived in Somerville. It's very near Cambridge. So I ran and got on the bus. I said, are you going to Cambridge? And he said, yes, eventually. And I said, okay, here's my quarter. Can I get a transfer? Because you could get a bus ride and a transfer for a quarter back then. Mm-hmm. I'm really dating myself.
Hey, I'm from those days too. So.
And I remember just sitting on the bus in a trance. I was so tired. And somehow I got to within, I made the transfer and I got to within walking distance of the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, which is where my office was. And I apparently walked up there, me, who hadn't slept in 4 days. And I was so exhausted. My husband, who was my boyfriend then, says, that my late husband said that I showed up at his office and said, "Can you take me home?" And he practically had to carry me to his car. And I think he did carry me from his car to his apartment. And I slept for 2 days straight. And I remember waking up and getting some orange juice and going back to sleep. It was. And then I woke up and I said, "Oh, okay, I'm done." And I got in my car and I was driving, I think, to school or something. And then it hit me. I had done it. I had finished. It'd been approved by my thesis committee. That was the first time I stayed up. It'd been bound. It was at the binder. I was done. I was now Dr. Asaro. And that moment when that realization came was probably one of the best in my life. And it was worth all the work that I did, all the doubts, all the, well, do I want to be a writer? Do I want to be a dancer? Do I want to be a scientist? It was worth it for that moment. And I say that because anybody who's not sure, if they're going, yeah, but this is hard work and I want to do that, and that's hard work. Stick it through, finish it. When you're done with whatever it is, your school or your degree or your doctorate or your thesis, you can always decide to do something else, but make yourself finish. It's worth it. So I did. And I stuck it out. I applied for postdocs. I got a postdoc. I did that for a year and a half. Then I got a bunch of offers as a professor. And so I accepted one in this gorgeous town in Ohio, Amish country. And one of the reasons I accepted was, well, I really liked the department. I liked everybody. But I don't know if you're familiar with Joan Sonzuski. She wrote Door into Ocean.
I don't think so.
She's a very good writer. She was a John Campbell, I think, several decades ago. But she was there. And see, they were very savvy. They had me have lunch with her. Everybody at all the other places where I interviewed, I had lunch with like the department head, very intimidating people. They put me at lunch with Joan because they knew we shared this, we both like to write. And it was very smart because I liked her so much. She's one of the reasons I went there. Mm-hmm. I knew by day 3 of teaching, because I had a pretty heavy teaching load. Kenyon College, which where I was at, is a liberal arts college. Mm-hmm. And teaching is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And I knew within 3 days, I wanted to be a writer. This was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. But, I stuck it out for 3 years just to be sure. Mm-hmm. And my husband said to me, when I was making the decision, and I had some problems with the department, I was the first woman in the department and I wasn't sure it was worth all the problems. I can talk more about that maybe later. But I'm talking to my husband. I said, I really want to write, but I don't want to walk. I just passed the big tenure review. And I thought, I don't want to walk out. This is a good job. It pays well. I've never sold anything in my writing. I don't know if I ever will. And he said to me, do you want to wake up when you're 75 and say, I had this prestigious job and I never did what I wanted to do, really? He said, you should take the chance, And he was very supportive because he didn't have a permanent job either. And I had a new baby. So I made the decision. I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, now's the time to do it, since I had just given birth. Mm-hmm. And the other women, there weren't a lot of women on the faculty back in late 1980s, early 1990s. I was the only woman in physics, and there weren't very many women in science at all. Mm-hmm. Or even, there were very few tenure women. And so those who were there said, don't say you're quitting because you had a baby. I said, well, not really. I mean, it's a good time. They said, yeah, but if you say you're quitting because you had a baby, they'll all say, see, we can't hire women because they quit as soon as they have a baby. And that may sound strange nowadays when everybody understands that when you have a kid, you're balancing, all this stuff. But back then it was you know, when women weren't that much in the workforce, especially in the field I was in. It was a really big deal. And so, I mean, I told the truth. I was quitting because there was another job I wanted to do, which was be a writer. But it was hard. It was hard to make that decision because I had no job. My husband had no job. We had nowhere to live. We had this baby. So, but he got a postdoc like 2 weeks before we had to leave for faculty housing. And
well,
then
I'm glad he got it.
but anyway, I started consulting. And the foundations of what later became the Chesapeake Math Program, which I ran for decades. And I wrote, and people actually bought my writing.
Yeah, how did you get from, you know, the stuff in your head to actually getting published?
Well, I didn't get as many rejections as a lot of people do. Almost from the beginning, I started getting letters from editors saying, well, I like, you know, this is not quite right, but I like your writing and I hope you submit more. Right away, like Analog, I submitted to because I'm a scientist. And Joan Sonzuski recommended me to David Hartwell, who was her editor at the time. I mean, he was one of the best editors in the field. And he said, yes, I like this. It was the last talk I submitted to him, which was very, at that time, women did not write a lot of feminist science fiction. There were some people who blazed trails, you know, Joanna Russ, Ursula Le Guin. I mean, there were a lot of women. Joan Da Vinci, I really liked. But it wasn't like now. I mean, it's a huge number of women writing in the science fiction field. I was writing hard SF, and there weren't very many back then. But Stan Schmidt liked my work. And right away, and he sent me something that said, you know, well, not this, but send me something else. I want to see more of your work. So I sent him something else, and I got the form rejection. So I was real pissed, you know. I didn't realize that you have to, it's an ongoing conversation. It's important for anybody who wants to sell too, because there was no self-publishing.
Right.
So if you want to sell to a well-known editor, it's kind of an ongoing conversation with very specific protocols. Well, what I should have done with the next story said, oh, I'm glad you liked such and such story. Thank you so much for inviting me to submit more. Here's another story. That would have gotten it out of slush pile. But I didn't, so it didn't get out of slush pile. So I wrote back and I said, well, you asked me to submit something, and this is fast, you know, this is good science, You know, I didn't just throw in faster than light travel. I did all these equations, and I have a paper I'm publishing about it, and you should like it because you wrote it. So look at it again, which is against all the protocols. You know, it's like, no. You don't write back to editor and say, no, you made a mistake. But I was very lucky because that did go directly to him. He wrote me back and said, actually, yes, you are correct. I do like this. And he said, and I've written on this too. The idea is to try and find a mathematical reason, at least, to justify your star grant. You know, people have been doing that for a long time. So, so he gave me a long list of stuff to fix. And he said, if you fix this stuff, I would be willing to look at it. So that was my first sale. I did fix it and I sent it back and he accepted it. About the same time, David Hartwell had the last talk for a long time. And that was, you know, I mentioned about women not writing feminist science fiction. That was, you know, very much my take on being a woman in a male-dominated profession. It didn't come across like that. It's the character is a man who crashes on this world that's a matriarchy, and he spends time in 6 different estates, 6 different city-states. And each has a culture that was a reflection to me of a culture on our planet. You know, some are very open, some, you know, require men to cover their faces in their robes, you know, some are, they were all different. And it was me working out all the sexism I'd faced in my career. And he really liked it. In fact, eventually he did publish it. He eventually brought 3 of my books, and that was one of them. I think it came out third. And it got nominated for Nebula. And at the time, I was kind of nervous because, I thought it might not sell because it had such a strong feminist slant, which things didn't, in the early 1990s, it was harder to find. But
Yeah.
it did. So I guess I was
Yeah.
too worried.
Well, it sold, and so did Primary Inversion. So did, book number 2. They won awards. It was all it was a happy outcome there. Just talking about this and your approach to becoming a writer, the way you got where you did, it would seem that you are uniquely qualified to write hard sci-fi, with or without a feminist slant. But gender remains an issue in speculative fiction. What was your experience as a woman and a scientist writing science fiction? I mean, in terms of the greater thing, not talking Stan Schmidt or David Hartwell, who were supporters, but in the universe of sci-fi.
People didn't take me seriously. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. They look at me and they think, she doesn't look like a scientist. I should say one thing though, the actual scientists who were writing hard SF did know, they understood when they saw my background, they knew what I was talking about. They took me seriously. People often say, oh, I bet the male scientists didn't want you in the club. And that's absolutely not true. They invited me in the club, it was everybody else. And what some of them even didn't quite take it as seriously. Even after I had a paper published in the American Journal of Physics about the science, the mathematics of that star driver came up with. But the thing is, people look at me and they think she doesn't look like a scientist, and either they'd say, you're too young, you're too pretty, you're too this, your hair's too long, you're not heavy enough. I mean, you wouldn't believe some of these people said. Your skin's too dark. If I go out in the sun, my skin gets dark. And it was really annoying. But then you get hit by a double whammy because they say, but obviously you got where you are because you're pretty or this or that. I say, no, I didn't. People think that they don't take me as seriously, which means already you're down several notches. And then they think, well, but she must have gotten there because somebody liked her. So you go down in their estimation even more notches. Mm-hmm. And I was like, some people even said, change your name to a man's name, dress down, dress in a way that doesn't show, make yourself look less womanly. And I said, that's all. Can I say it now? I know I'm not supposed to say the F word, but.
I think we're probably safe. I agree with you, as a matter of fact, yes.
This is what I am. I'm not going to change my name. I'm not going to pretend I'm a man. I'm not going to make myself look like whatever someone thinks a woman has to look like to take them seriously. Mm-hmm. And sure, I had trouble with it. And then, the other thing was about the romance. I didn't know romance as a genre existed. I found out when I had my daughter and Harlequin son that they must do this. They find out about women who had babies and they send you lots of novels. Free novels. So you want to subscribe, you can get one of these, one every month or once a week or something. And I thought, oh, these are nice. Mm-hmm. These are nice. They're about love stories. And I was in love with my husband. I just had a daughter, and these were about people falling in love and starting a family. Mm-hmm. So that was my introduction to romance. And I didn't really think a lot about it. I didn't know it as a genre. But when I wrote science fiction, my first book, Primary Inversion, is like Romeo and Juliet in outer space, except not with a bad ending. It has and people think they're dead, but they're not. They went off and went into exile for a while. Mm-hmm. For a while. So it had the happily ever after ending.
Right.
And it was told from the point of view of a woman, the older woman. The guy was young and handsome and gorgeous. It was all role reverse. She was the hard-nosed military officer. It was sauce. It was like almost everybody's favorite character. She's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But you know, and he was the one who was softer, but they came from warring empires, you know.
Yeah.
Off they went and fell in love. You know, it's this big science fiction epic with a love story told from the woman's point of view, valuing the woman's view. Science fiction, despite what people think, actually likes love stories. And hard SF, love stories have a place there. It always has, because hard SF is about solving a problem. Well, romantic love stories, in a sense, are about solving the emotional problem.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always been told from the male perspective. Even if it's a woman married, it's valuing what the man wants and what he gets, and he gets to go this woman.
The girl, the woman is the reward, not the agent of change.
And even if she is the agent, she's still beautiful. She can really shoot. Something about women with guns. I don't know. But, you know, primary inversion turned a lot of things on its head. It's even primary inversion, the title.
Yeah, the title, it just tells you right there.
Yeah. And so people said, I started getting emails from romance readers. Oh, I love finally somebody can write hard SF with a good romance. And I crossed over. Somebody sent it to Romantic Times Book Club magazine, and it got a really good review. And Melinda Helfer used to love my book. She gave it really good reviews. So all of a sudden I had this hard SF book crossing over to the romance. And it didn't even work. Like, romance readers write to me saying, well, I want to talk to you about that engine. I'm not convinced that the number that you know, very technical, right? Romance readers are much smarter than people think. And then I'd get these lovely letters from young men who read science fiction and say, oh, I really like the love story, but I want to know, did they have a baby? I want them to have baby, you have it. And I thought, this is like the reverse of what I expected. But it was wonderful. I loved it. And so I told my publisher, I said, oh, I crossed over the romance audience, and it's a big audience. There's a lot of them. So let's play that up. And they were like, no. And they said, no one will take you seriously if you do this. And I hadn't realized how right they were. But so I looked at the numbers of people reading romance. And I looked at the number of people reading hard SF. And I said to them, yeah, I'll lose some readers, but I'm going to gain more. Mm-hmm. And so I started talking about, I have to make a decision. It was the same as when people said, change your name to male name. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. This is what I am. I mean, nothing will ever change if we adapt to fit the status quo. So I thought nothing will ever change if I adapt. If I try to be the type of writer that will appeal to already established audience, which was perceived as primarily male. I don't think it was primarily male, but that happened.
Yeah. I
said, this has this aspect that's me. Writing love stories is me. So I started talking about the romance. And oh boy, yeah, I got a lot of kickback on that because it was girly. I even had some authors say to me, well, you're writing girly stuff. I don't care if it's hard SF. I don't care if it's just, I mean, some of it was military science fiction, big epic battles. They said, but it's got this girly stuff in it. So no one will ever consider you a great writer. You will never win a Nebula. You will never win Hugo. You will never be a great writer. I actually had, I won't say who he was, but I had someone who thought he was big stuff back in the day. Tell me that, face to face. And I just thought, yeah, you wait and see. But it's true. There were other people who felt that way who were less obvious about it. And I started getting listed as a romance writer rather than a science fiction writer, almost like it was, they were saying, okay, she writes hard SF, but we can dilute it. And I didn't know what to do. And then we got my first royalty report, and it was huge. It was
Talk
like
about
equal
living
to my
well as the best revenge.
Yeah, it was like, and my publisher said, oh. Okay, you can talk about the romance. So, it's sold better. Eventually it kind of died out because the thing is, I don't really write romance. I write science fiction with romantic subplots.
Mm-hmm.
But the romance reader said, you're not writing romance. We like it because you included the happily ever after as in your romantic subplot. But this is not romance. You have to like science fiction to like your books. Your books are SF. And I think eventually that became known too in the SF community. I write hard SF. I write military SF. The fact that I had a crossover was unexpected because of that. And because of that, that was another reason I had some trouble being taken seriously. It was easier to say, oh yeah, she's just a romance author. Don't take her seriously. And I kind of gave them that ammunition. But in retrospect, I say, if you had to do it again, would you not? And I think I would, because I was honored that all these people who didn't normally read science fiction were writing me letters saying, I really like this. This is science fiction I like.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same kind of thing like Lois McMaster Bujold had a very strong crossover. She probably still does. Or Ursula Le Guin had a strong crossover. Forgiveness Day, her classic novella that won all these awards, is essentially a romance. It's science fiction romance. Mm-hmm. Who are some other ones? There's a lot more. I'm a little nervous now. I'm drawing a blank.
Well, I know Catherine Valente.
I love her stuff. I'm on her page.
Was also faced similar issues about romance, being a woman, not fitting the tropes, if you will, of a sci-fi writer. And like you, she's also written fantasy, which of course taints her even further.
I didn't get that with my fantasy though.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying that she has faced that, and I was about to say, given that it's still there, given that it's still happening to authors, what would you recommend to women who want to go into and write hard sci-fi? How would you?
The more of us there are, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually there becomes a saturation point, like we're seeing now with television, and I hope it's also starting with movies now, where enough women are doing it that enough women have moved into positions where they can influence, the marketing. And really it's marketing. It's not that people don't want to read hard SF by women, but plenty do. I mean, my readers are about half women and half men. And it's pretty much halfway split. And it's just that marketing perceives certain things based on past sales. And as more women move into positions where they can affect that, they can say, well, this is not really the way we think it works. Like Wonder Woman, Patty, what's her last name?
Oh, I know.
The director. I'm drawing.
It's not, is it Jenkins or am I?
Yeah, I think that was her name. She's brilliant, and she did a brilliant movie, and it did well. So that was, women like that are working their way up in the entertainment industry. And I think books are probably farther along, and then television, and then movies. But it's all changing. I mean, you've got, a female lead now in Star Wars. All the stuff that we wanted when we were kids that we didn't get. It's coming. I almost cried. Okay, my daughter kept saying, oh, we got to go see Wonder Woman. I love it. And I was thinking to myself, I've seen this before. It's a very strong woman, but then, they water it down. They make her weak. The guy takes over something. But, I thought, well, I'm hearing good things. So I finally went with her. And I'm watching it and I think, oh, this is really good. And I'm enjoying it. And then they're at the part where they're not at no man's land yet, but they're going through this battle-torn area of the country that they're trying to infiltrate.
Yeah.
And I'm starting, and she keeps saying, we have to do this, we have to do that. And they keep saying, no, we can't. We have to stay on the mission. And I'm starting to think to myself, this is she's not doing anything yet. I mean, she had wonderful scenes and she was doing things, but I was waiting for her to become Wonder Woman. Just as I'm thinking about that, the no man's land scene comes up. That moment when he says, no, you can't do it. She says, maybe you can't, but I can. And she takes off her thing, and then you see her going up. And the director shot that beautifully. It was perfect. She's a very beautiful, sensuous woman, but it was never gratuitous, the way men shooting women who are sexy often are. It wasn't like that. It was a female gaze, not the male gaze. And she's climbing up, and you see her shield, you see the thing around her head, and then she gets up there, and she just walks across no man's land. And she's doing all this stuff, you know, but it was incredible. That scene was amazing. And there was so much power in just that walk that she took. And I thought, I've waited all my life to see a scene like this with a woman, you know, a strong female character, because Jenkins got it dead on right. And I actually started to cry. It's like, you wait for 50 years reading science fiction, longing to see strong characters, and there it is, what you dreamed about on the screen. And so,
yeah.
Things are changing.
Yes, we are finally writing the stories we want to see, you know, and that people are finally giving us what we want to see, a goddess instead of a sex object.
Yeah, I started that with primary inversion. You know, I remember a male reader telling me he thought he wouldn't be able to read it because it was written first person from a female warrior. And he said, but you know what? I stopped noticing after a while. And I was so glad that he said that. I think there were a lot of people that just thought, because it wasn't that common back then. And I remember people telling me, I can't relate to this. It's a female warrior. The woman's in charge. The woman's the main character. Other people loved it, but it was less accepted back then. When I wrote Catch the Lightning, that was the next one that came out. It was about a 17-year-old Latina and interacting with, you know, this hot starfighter pilot from an alternate universe.
Yes.
But I remember I wrote it first person as a 17-year-old Latina. Yeah. And I remember marketing came back and said, no, this was prior to Divergence and the Hunger Games and all that. They came back and said, nobody wants to read a science fiction adventure story with a 17-year-old Latina protagonist. She's too young. It's a girl, you know. And, you know, that was before, if they just waited a few years, it exploded with the Hunger Games and diversity and Divergence and all that. But, you know, so I had to change her age to make her an older woman looking back on her youth. And it was really awkward because it didn't feel right. And I had to put in all this extra hard SF stuff. So, and I don't think anybody cared. I mean, I had one review. I had one person who said, I don't believe this is a Latina because she's too smart. And I was like, I just want to punch him. I had someone else who said, it seems unrealistic. I don't know why they thought she was unrealistic. I mean, she's based on, you know, my childhood and people I knew. But then he said, then I looked, then a different one, I think it was Tom Easton at Analog, said, well, I thought she was unrealistic, but then I looked at Catherine and I decided, because, you know, it's dated. The part of the book takes place in 1980s LA, East LA.
Yeah.
Neighborhood. So, you know, all the Spanish terms and stuff, the slang is from back then. So people, they said, I don't know if people still said that. I said, well, they don't. This is what the kids I knew in high school said, you know.
Yeah.
And you don't want to know how long ago that was.
This kind of gets into something else I wanted to address. I noticed on your website that you're revising a number of books in the Scullion saga. Yeah. Okay. And, you know, we're talking about a book that you feel is a little dated, that you feel had to be revised in a way that did not suit the story in order
Yeah.
to
I
fulfill the
rewrote it.
contract. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, is this one of the books that you're revising? And can you tell our viewers a little bit about your revisions on the Scullion saga and, you know, what you're doing with that?
Yes. What I'm doing, I got the rights back from Tor for a lot of the Scullion books. Took about 20 years, I mean, more than 20 years. But because they were still selling, not a lot, but they were selling. But finally, my agent talked them into it. So when I got them back, we were going to release them as ebooks and maybe, you know, release them as paperbacks. I have so many old copies of the hardcovers that I don't know if we're going to do the hard copy version. But we started releasing them as revised ebooks. And the first thing I did was catch the lightning, is get rid of the woman looking back, because it never worked anyway. I made her 17 years old again. I tightened up the hard SF. I made it, you know, I could do it because she doesn't know the technology, so he has to explain it to her. So we could do it with that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I tightened it up so that there wasn't, you know, the plot didn't come to a screaming halt. I just completely rewrote the whole thing. I mean, and because I'd also had to kind of be very tight about the way I wrote it, I was still an unknown author at that time. It was the second one of the 3 he bought. So this time I could give a little bit more of a background and of character development. So, and there are very definitely 2 parts of that book. There's one that takes place in 1980s Los Angeles in this barrio where she lives. And there's other takes place in the future of the Scullion Empire where he's from. So I divided it into 2 books, Lightning Strike Book 1 and Lightning Strike Book 2. Yeah. It's the same story, but it's very much rewritten. I rewrote Primary Inversion because I'm a better writer now than I was. That was my first one. I rewrote The Last Talk. Those 3 are out. I rewrote some of my shorter fiction that appeared in the anthology, Roaring 4 Voices. And I think the Nebula, the one that won the Nebula is in there. And to the guy who told me I'd never win a Nebula, I won one twice. So there. I've been nominated for the Hugo a lot. I sort of almost won it. I'm still not sure what happened. I think it was A Roaring 4 Voices, the novella, was my first Hugo nomination. And it was when the Worldcon was in Australia. And on the first ballot, I was way ahead. But I didn't win. It has something to do with the Australian balloting system, that I wasn't ahead by enough. I was just shy by a few votes. So it had to go through the whole Australian balloting system. And I was ahead. But in the end, someone else won. Greg Egan, who was Australian, won by like 1 or 2 votes. Do you know how the Australian balloting system works?
No, honestly, this year's Worldcon will be my first. So I haven't even voted in a Hugo.
Oh, it's fun. You'll have a great time. Look it up sometime. It's this real arcane, like it's magic.
It's Australia. Everything there is trying to kill you. Let's just face it.
But anyway, so I didn't win it after all, even though I was way ahead. I wasn't ahead by enough. Mm-hmm. So, but I've had quite a few things nominated for a Hugo. I still haven't won that one. I've won the Nebula Prize.
No, but there's plenty of time.
Yeah, and I have a lot more planned. But so that Aurora and 4 Voices and some other stories are in an anthology called Aurora and 4 Voices that ISFIC Press brought out when I was their guest of honor at WindyCon. Mm-hmm. And I think now they sold it to, well, I don't want to get it wrong and offend anybody, but they did sell it to, I believe, a very well-known, respected publisher that also runs, is it Oscar? I don't know. I'm sorry I'm being so dense here, but
hey, you're way above my pay grade when it comes to cons. So I'm going, I've never been to Boscone.
Oh, it's a wonderful convention. There's so many good ones. You should come.
There are a lot of good ones, and I'm looking forward to getting back to in-person conventions when the current unpleasantness is over. So yeah. So, is this effort of revising going to extend to the entirety of the Ascolian saga?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I'm a better writer now than I was 20 years ago. It's not a huge, Catch a Lightning was a big difference. I mean, that ended up 2 books.
Yeah.
And they're not too short. I mean, it's 2 full books. But I just write better. You know, you learn a lot of the craft. I've had, I think, 30 books published roughly.
Yeah.
So, you know,
yeah.
Hopefully I'm not so dense I don't learn.
Something we all hope that we learn from experience. Yeah, speaking of the Ascolian Empire, the saga of the Ascolian Empire, that is a huge thing, you know, 20, 30 books all interacting, even if they aren't directly in it, they have intersections with the universe, etc. And at its heart, which, speaking as somebody who's half Italian to somebody who is Italian, it's a family saga, and, you know, multi-generational family saga proceeding through history. That would seem to require as much research into history, culture, sociology as the hard science. You know, was there a particular culture or something that you based your theories and your family dynamics on when you started creating the Ascolian Empire?
Well, yes and no. Some of it, I don't know where it came from. Like I said, I started imagining these stories when I was a kid. And they evolved over the years. And I honestly don't know why they evolved the way they did. Some of it, yeah, some of it I tried to base on Greek mythology, Greek and Roman mythology, like base the Ruby dynasty in my saga on Greek gods and goddesses. And I'm telling you, man, that made for a dysfunctional family. I said, no, I better not do this. This is this person sleeping with that person. And no.
And he's hanging his wife up by her toes because she dared to contest his philandering. Yeah, that's really dysfunctional.
My feminist soul was offended by this, as well as just common decency. So I mean, there's hints of it here and there, but you know, like all the characters are the Ruby dynasty draw their heritage from long ago Mayan and Indian cultures on Earth, Indian and Mayan, or Maya and the Mayan language. Where did that come from? I don't know. And you know, for a long time on my covers, they all look white. And I think I might have mentioned this before. I finally put my foot down on Skyfall. One of the main characters in that book, the second most or third most important character, is Black. The main character is Roka, queen of the Ruby dynasty. And when she saw him, she knew nothing about Earth. So she described him as, you know, dark skin, dark curly hair, you know, but she didn't think he's African descent because she wasn't from Earth.
Yeah.
Well, they gave the artist, I think, a description from the book, that description. And he's Italian, so the guy looked Italian. And I said, no, you can't do that. He's very clearly Black. At one point, I even referred to, after they'd been under siege for a while and nobody's hair was getting cut, and talked about how he had an afro. And I said, you have to show him as what he is. And I have to say, Tor was very good about it. It's one of the few times I made a stink. So I want to make a stink, but I tried to be nice about it. But I was very firm. I said, you don't do this. And my editor was wonderful. He said, "Oh, I'm very sorry. We didn't realize, we read the description, and it's sort of like the default."
Yeah, it is.
Default.
That
But
is.
they changed it. They changed it. So at least he's the best drawn character on the cover, I think, because they had to do it twice. The other two, the proportions don't quite look right. And Roka still, the queen still looks white, but
You can't win them all, right? You
yeah.
try. You pick your battles and you try to win what you can.
It's getting better. I mean, if you look at the Bronze Skies, you can really see the Maya influence in the characters and the background. It's really cool.
Yeah,
I like it.
So yeah. What are you working on now?
Oh, I'm writing the 4th major Bajan book. It's called
Okay.
The Jigsaw Assassin.
Aha.
I'm working on that. I'm revising the Quantum Rose. That's the next one on my list of stuff to revise. Actually, the thing that's taking me the longest on that is I'm revising the essay, the science essay at the back. Because the entire book, The Quantum Rose, is an allegory to quantum scattering theory. And it was a last minute thing when the book was due and I was late. And I said, but nobody will know what these subtitles of the book mean. Everything like, first scattering channel, second scattering channel, kernel, KERNEL, stuff like that. It's all mathematical terms or, physics terms. So I threw in at the last minute, there's like 20 or 25 chapters, and I tried to explain all the terms. And I didn't have time to do it. So I just threw it all in there. Some of it was kind of inaccurate, so much so that one of the translators of the book actually made some corrections. It was translated. And then I finally gave up and I said, well, there's more in here. I don't have enough time to do it this essay. Go look up airy rainbow physics, stuff like that. Or what, airy is someone who develops a lot of physics ideas about rainbows. Well, this time now I have time, so I'm going through that thing. And it's a lot of work trying to show how each chapter and each chapter subtitle relates to the whole analogy. So that's what's taking the most good.
That'll be interesting when it's done. And this time the translator won't have to fix it on the fly.
Well, he didn't really fix it. I was kind of pissed off. It's like he was making footnotes. It'd say, well, she said this, but what I think is this. And I'm like, no, you're the translator. You get to footnote my essay. But when I was going through it to do the revisions, I realized some of it, I wrote it so fast. I skipped and then explained things, I got it out there. And it won the Nebula. I don't know how it won the Nebula.
Don't ask. It won the Nebula. Just don't ask.
Well, I didn't believe it would win. I was going against Connie Willis. I think George R. R. Martin. There's some famous hard SF science fiction writers. Everybody else on that ballot was a big name, was a well-respected writer that I respected greatly. And then there was me, who was, much newer on the scene. The Quantum Rose is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast in a quantum in a quantum mechanical and a science fiction setting. And I didn't expect it to win. I genuinely did not think I would ever win. Well, do you ever see in the Olympics, there was this one around that time, there was this race that was run in the Olympics where everybody ran into each other all over. Do you remember that? They all ran into each other.
I remember the photos of it. Because I don't watch the Olympics, but it was such a, the photos were like, wait a minute, these are the best runners in the world. How did they get in that tangle?
And then I guess one of the people who was closer to last place ran around him and won. That's how I felt, like when I won the Nebula, like everybody split the vote and then I went around him and won. And I'm sitting there at the awards banquet talking to Nancy Kress, who's a very good friend. And she says, well, did you write your acceptance speech? And I said, no, I didn't bother because I'm not going to win. She says, Catherine, you have to write something. She said, look, I didn't think I'd win when I won the Nebula. And when I did, I was so grateful. I wrote something. I said, Nancy, I'm not going to win. She said, you never know. Don't down. So I took my the name tag I had, I turned it
Yes,
over, and I wrote some stuff on the back, don't forget to thank da 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 da. And my agent was sitting at the next table over. Apparently, so they were doing the thing and doing their little shtick, that they do.
yes.
And they didn't list me as a hard SF writer. They listed all the other hard SF writers. And my agent told me later she was really annoyed because they did that. But I think the reason they didn't mention me is because their next sentence was, and the winner is Captain Asaro for the Quantum Rose. And I remember I was just sitting there like, what? That can't be. And my agent says, I sat there for like 15 seconds just staring at them, to the point where she said she was going to get up and go accept it. And finally I noticed her going. So I went up there and I was so grateful to Nancy Kress because, if Nancy hadn't told me to write that down, I would have been too stunned to speak. So
Yes.
I'm like practically shaking, looking at things, saying, I want to thank, yes, my agent, my editor, Stan Schmidt for publishing the first half, my agent at Tor for letting me do the rest of it, It was a wonderful moment, but unexpected.
Right up there with finishing your realizing you had finished your dissertation and were now a doctor.
Right. Took me 2 days.
2 days later, after you woke up. Practically a Sleeping Beauty story right there.
Sleeping anyway. I doubt I looked beautiful. You know how I knew my husband was in love with me? Because I'd been up for 4 days. I looked like shit. I looked awful. I hadn't had a bath for 4 days. My hair was, I looked like something that crawled out from under a rock, right? And he comes to my office and he's looking at me and says, oh, you look so beautiful today. I said, that guy's gotta be in love. Because no way nobody else thought I looked beautiful that day.
But you had survived.
I had survived, yeah. And he was a keeper. He was
a keeper. I remember him. We were at your house once and he was very, very nice. I remember that.
The love of my life.
One should have a love like that. One should always have one.
Yeah.
Okay, we're coming up on the end of the hour. And first, we always give you the option of adding anything you like, but we'd also like you to tell folks where they can find you on the net.
Yes. I'm at catherineasaro.net. So it's not .com, it's .net. Mm-hmm. And you can also get a lot of my old books that are out of print. Starfight Music has a link there where you can order a lot of them that are no longer in print. I also have a Patreon page where, since I don't teach anymore, I have to support myself 100% with my writing. So if you want me to write books instead of getting a job as a waitress in the local diner, please contribute to my Patreon page. I don't know if people know how it works. People contribute, $1, $2, $5 a month. They become your patrons, and then you get free, like I post things that I'm writing. I post essays. I post stuff about, my garden. But that's at patreon.com/Catherine Asaro. Mm-hmm. So those are my websites.
Great. And any closing remarks?
I just consider myself very fortunate to make a living as a writer. I do consider it a living. It's not a hobby. Mm-hmm. So I'm just grateful to have been around this long. Thank you for the interview.
Oh, thank you for joining us, Catherine. And thank you for joining us here at ConTinual.